Welcome to Pencils and Lipstick. This is a podcast for indie authors. I'm Kat Caldwell, novelist, short story writer, and book coach. Here on Pencils and Lipstick, we're obsessed with all things story, and it is my goal to bring you the writing tips that you need to make your novel come to life. Hi everyone, welcome to episode 254 of Pencils and Lipstick. I'm Kat Caldwell, the hostess of the show, and today we have Gabriel Gates on with me talking about his life, keeping up a full-time job while writing, and pretty much killing it on Kickstarter. I actually found him through Kickstarter. If you guys want to see Gabriel or me or his books, which I hold up during the interview, you're going to want to head to YouTube and listen and watch the podcast over there. I know podcast is technically an audio medium, but some of you really wanted the video, and so now it's over there. You can follow the show on pretty much every podcasting app possible that's out there. It even eventually gets over to my Substack, lessonsinstory.substack.com. Yeah, there's no excuse. You can listen. It's pretty awesome. It's wonderful that we get to stay in touch with each other this way. So wherever you are listening, if you would hit subscribe or give a review or share it, that really helps the show. I have worked with other people, editing and all that. Now it's just down to me. I am trying to streamline things, and, the podcast is more like a labor of love, we shall say, but it definitely is encouraging to see when people review or share or, subscribe. Those are the numbers that I can see more than anything. And it just it makes me feel like I'm not talking alone. Even though I'm not, because I hear from you guys too. You guys can also click below and join my newsletters, both my readers newsletter and my writers newsletter, and hear directly from me. And that's probably the best way to get a hold of me. If you have a question or thought, you can go to katcaldwell.com on the contact page and suggest somebody to the show, suggest yourself to the show. I prefer to talk to people who have published more than one book, because we're talking about kind of a long-term time as a writer, people who are not just starting out. But you can pitch it to me. We'll talk about it. Somebody else in the publishing industry. I am up for your recommendations. This week in my life, it is February already, and I am going to be putting together something for another summit. I'll be talking about nonfiction, pretty much memoir writing. So if you are memoir writers, you'll hear more about that summit. I just finished up a summit this weekend, which was pretty fun, the Write Your Own Way Summit with Monica Hay. I highly suggest you guys check her out, especially if you feel very none of the stuff that is taught works for you, the way that goal setting or, word writing or getting things done works for you. Monica is great at finding a way to really go around the norm and helping people get their books done anyway. And so I talked about building a sustainable writing practice, even through a busy life, which I have all the time. I never slow down. So oh my goodness, I'm looking at my calendar. In 2 weeks, I leave for India for 10 days. And, it'll be just hit the ground running. I'm going on a missions trip and going there really to be outside of myself and serve people around me. And so, that is definitely an interruption to life. It is something I'm really grateful that I get to be doing. But I want to talk to you guys a little bit about allowing the interruptions to come. As we, head into February in the indie author world, of course, we're still trying to talk about these goals that we have and how you should get your work done. And a lot of people are moving away from the hustle mindset, but it's difficult to move away from hustle mindset and yet still talk about the the very hard fact of the matter is you have to write the words to get the book out, right? Like you can spend 20 years writing the book. That is your choice. You are free to choose that. But in the end, the book is out when the book is done, and the book is done when you've written the words. And so there's kind of this loop, that you have to get through of, yes, sometimes writing the book is just the hard sitting down and doing it. It's just hard work. It's the work, right? And we all want to very much be artists, and we all very much want to sort of go with our emotional whims or artistic whims, right? But I am a firm believer in the fact that you want your book out, you have to write it. If you want to write it, you got to sit down. You got to stop picking up your phone. And for me, it's like right when I get, almost when I really am getting into the writing, all of a sudden my body just wants to stand up and leave the computer. And I've noticed this. And it is a strange phenomenon, and I'm not sure what to do with it yet. I think I'm just in that like recognition phase. Like, oh, I'm really resisting this. It's not even, hard anymore. The words are coming, but like this is like the work. It's like my body's resisting that. It's very interesting. But I want to talk to you guys about allowing the interruptions to be part of your life as well. Um, I listened to quite a few interviews with authors on their, schedule and their routine, and how do they write, and how do they get their writing done. And I find it an interesting question because it's really necessary. And I think sometimes we're looking for like the magic. Like I just sometimes write an hour a day and these novels appear, right? That's kind of what we hope will happen, but that's not going to happen. Um, but I think the other thing is you start thinking that you have to write in a certain way, and that the life interruptions are a whole problem. Like they are an interruption. They are not life. They are this thing that is imposing itself on you and impeding you from getting your writing done. And I think just as Gabriel Gates is going to be talking to us about how he holds a full-time job while writing his books, if you are not working outside of the home, if you're working inside the home, like let's say maybe you're retired, maybe you are like primarily mom or dad, and then you're trying to like, so you feel like you have a little extra hours, or maybe you don't even, maybe it just applies to everyone. These interruptions that we have in life are really called life. And to allow them to be part of your sphere, instead of thinking of them as like the brick wall against which you have to beat your head, to try to embrace them, like try to use them as a goal ender, right? So for example, on the 20th I leave very early in the morning. My goal has had to shift a little, and because I am completely rewriting Crossing the Channel. Haha, didn't announce that part, did I? I threw it out and I'm completely rewriting. And it's going to be done by the 18th, and that is my goal. And I am going to be honest with you, if I don't make the goal, I'm going to probably be really hard on myself because, that's what I do. And I'll have to work through that. So you can use them as a goal, to get things done. Next March, I have something else. I come home from India, and 3 weeks later, I have something else. And then 2 weeks after that, I have family coming into town. You see where I'm going with this? You can take the attitude of these are very big interruptions to which I could then panic, and I have in the past, on how is it possible? How will I possibly get anything done? Because after crossing the channel, I want to finish crossing the Thames. And I've had to move that goalpost as well, right? So I've been struggling with this a little bit. These are things that I want to do, that I also like want to enjoy while they're here. And so I want to say this: if you find yourself really busy, if you find yourself having these interruptions in life, try to find a way to use them as your goal. Try to find a way to be present when you are there instead of beating yourself up in the back of your head, right, about how you didn't get your goal done, or you should be writing, or you should be doing something else. The experience of being grounded in that moment is probably going to feed your artistic ability more than thinking, I should be writing about this, I should be painting about this, I should put this somewhere, I should be writing at the same time, I should, you know, all these things. Really, the older I get, the more I realize you cannot do two things at once and do both things well. I can do about 500 things at once as mom, right? But which ones can I do well? So I cannot be present on a missions trip and be writing in my head and do both things well, right? It's not going to happen. I cannot be present with family and be writing in my head and do both things well. So, I think it's just this summit where I had to talk about busy life and how you get words done. You will probably feel like you are doing a lot of run, 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 stop, run, 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 stop. And that is a lot of how I feel. And it's something that you just sort of have to work through. But I just want to encourage you guys to be present. If you don't have big interruptions that are coming in your life, I would encourage you to make some. I really would. I was thinking these authors who claim to Monday through Saturday or Monday through Sunday sometimes do the exact same thing every single day. I would challenge that for most people, eventually your imagination and your art part of the brain will run dry and will need to be refilled. And so I would challenge you, if you don't have a big interruption coming, to make one. Like a weekend at the museum, go for a walk, go for a hike. Instead of saying, I'm going to catch up on my words on Saturday, actually go outside. You know what? And when you create that space, when you give your brain a break, it might just feed a part of you that you didn't know needed feeding. I would just challenge you, just do one, just find one. But if you do have a break that's coming that you're not really looking forward to, try to be in the moment, try to observe. And like in the moment, like you can observe what's happening right around you. What are the colors that people are wearing? Observe facial expressions. Actually, what facial expressions do people make? Hand expressions. Just be present in noticing things. How are people reacting? How are people's tones of voices? Not to like at the same time be writing in your head, but just as an observer of humans. I think sometimes we can be so in our stories that we forget that we can just go out and observe people. How are they acting? How do they act around people? Like, is that person nervous? Like, how are they moving their hands? How are they moving their bodies? And maybe this will feed you the next time you sit down. And instead of being stuck on, he took a deep breath, 500 times, maybe, different things will come to your mind because you have been around people and been observing people. So I am going to try to do that. I am really looking forward to hiking up in the Himalayas again. I'm really looking forward to just being present in God's creation. I think it's going to be wonderful. And I say all this because it is very difficult for me to be present. And so a lot of times what I'm doing when I talk to you all is talking to myself and trying to find that way around the things that are happening in my life to encourage myself to be there in the moment, to enjoy it, to, like milk it for all the enjoyment that I can, right? I mean, if anything, this last week has really re-shown us that anything can happen in life, right? So to be part of this moment and whatever you are doing right now is really more important. right? Like if you are writing right now, be part of it, be present in it, enjoy it. If you are having to go, do something else, be part of family things or be part of something else, enjoy it. Try to find that moment in it. Try to, at least observe people in it. So I just kind of wanted to get that off my chest. I hope that that makes sense to you all as I'm like processing it in my own head. But let's get into the interview because I think you guys are going to like talking to or listening to J. Gabriel Gates. I found him on Kickstarter. I found his Luck God series and I read it. And again, if you want to go to YouTube, you can see the covers as I hold them up when I talk to him. But J. Gabriel Gates is the author of fantasy, horror, and sci-fi books, including the Luck God series, The Lamplighters, The Sleepwalkers, and Blood Zero Sky. He is also co-author of the Track series, a YA contemporary fantasy trilogy. And so he actually has a new Kickstarter coming out, which we are going to talk about. And the links you will be able to find below. All the links you'll be able to find out more about him and, be part of the Kickstarter, especially if you want to know like how to run a Kickstarter yourself. One of the best things that you can do is observe a Kickstarter from like start to finish, to be present, to see the emails, to see how things happen, to see the fulfillment, all that. So I encourage you guys to listen to this interview and check out the Kickstarter and J. Gabriel Gates at jgabrielgates.net. But of course, it will be in the show notes below. And next week, I'll be talking to Janice Hardy. You're not going to want to miss that one. But right now, let's listen to my interview with J. Gabriel Gates. Okay. Hello, J. Gabriel Gates. You are my guest today. It's nice to see you.
So happy to be with you. Thank you for having me.
I'm pretty excited to talk to you. I'm going to hold up your book. So I found you, when was this? Last year? Yeah. The Kickstarter?
Yes.
2024. We're in January, so everything was last year.
Yeah, right.
I honestly, I have to say it was the cover first that drew me to it. This is amazing. Did you do this?
I did not. Nope.
Okay. Anyway, it looks great.
Nope.
I love it. And then just the story. So we're going to talk about the story of like these gods based on like the cards. It's just very cool. I have not finished the series yet, but I have gotten through half of it.
Okay.
Yep. I'm not a very good series ender. That has nothing to do with you at all.
I'm notorious for reading book one, and then it's like, and I don't read on often because
Yes.
there's so many series out there, and then people go, "Oh, did you read such and such?" And you're like, "No."
Yes.
So then at least if I've at least read book one, then I can be like, I read book one.
But I know the characters. Oh, I'm glad
Right.
to find somebody like me because I feel terrible sometimes. I'm like, oh, I actually liked that. I need to go back and finish
Yeah.
the series. I'm
No,
the
no,
same
it's
with
not a
TV.
reflection on the series. It's like there's so many out there, and I just want to be familiar with like everybody
Yes.
I can. So yeah.
And I have not gotten to like the Court of Thorns or whatever that one is, Sarah Mass. I haven't gotten around to that one, but this one was really good. And I really liked the characters. It was really different. Honestly, it was different than most books that I have read.
Thank
But
you.
then I have to caveat that with I'm not super in the fantasy world, so I don't know. According to me, it was a really different premise.
Thank you. Yeah, I know. I think it is a pretty original premise, I think, which is great. And yeah, my books are always a little different. I've tried to be like just write a cookie cutter book that like like
Yes.
all the points that people like and make it but like uh I don't know, my books
You
tend to
can't.
take twists and turns and tend to go in their own directions, which I love, I'm happy about, but
Yeah. They're
it's
imaginative. I liked, the reluctant hero. It's hard to find that imaginative way to make them reluctant and then to push them into actually, doing the thing that the reader knows that they're going to do. And I think especially Girl of Hearts, like she's still the reluctant hero, but just the way that you push her into it was not just like, okay, just get to that point, right? Like it was like, okay, wait, what's going on with her? And I don't know. It was very
yeah.
good. But
And
um
she's not a chosen one either, like she she just kind of gets like roped into it. And uh,
yes.
for anyone not familiar with the series, so it's this young woman, Aggie, and she's like in high school. She's like a junior in high school, and she has OCD. She's very smart, like valedictorian type of student. But her mom goes missing and she meets a guy who turns out to be like the Jack of Hearts. And the premise of the series is that there are four suits of demigods with the power to control luck based on the four card suits. And her mom might have been captured by one of the bad luck suits, so she kind of has to become a heart in order to find her mom.
Right, right. And I like how it's like bad luck, good luck. It's not necessarily good versus evil, which is a little bit of a twist, especially with the end of Girl of Hearts, where you're like, I kind of want this to happen, but I don't. Like you're kind of
Right.
like, I don't
Well,
know if I want this to continue like that.
yeah, it's interesting because it's sort of a side effect of like playing out the premise in my mind.
Mm,
Like, initially you think, okay, the red suits are good luck, the black suits are bad luck, good versus evil. Like it's pretty simple. But then the more you think about it is like good luck for me, if somebody's like rooting against me, then if something turns out well for me, that was bad for them, right? So good luck for me,
right.
bad luck for them. And so it becomes like a double-edged sword, so bad luck
Yes.
can be used to make something happen that's overall good if it's not good for somebody else. And so it's all depends on your perspective. It depends on your
Right.
view. Um,
Yeah. And it gets you thinking as the reader, right? Like, oh, maybe it's not all black and white. It's that gray area. Like, what is good for me is not necessarily good for everyone. I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. And there are characters, there are good luck suit characters that do bad things,
mhm,
they're not great people. And there are, bad luck suit characters who you empathize with, and they're still pulled to do things that are not good because that increases their power, right? So like the
right,
bad luck suits are have a compulsion to do bad luck things, but that doesn't mean that they're bad people necessarily.
right.
So it's all very morally gray and sort of complicated. And I
Yeah,
think some people love that about the series. Probably some people maybe don't because it's not necessarily what you think of as just good versus
right.
evil. It's complicated, and there are theoretically 52 demigods, right? Because that's how many. Because
True.
there are the ranks of the suits as well. So like there's just a lot, and I could theoretically I could go back and continue writing in that world, right? Because it's like 52 gods
Keep going.
writing on it. So yeah.
So this was not your first series, and this is like what would you call this is fantasy, but is it a specific genre of fantasy that you would
Yeah, yeah, it would be considered YA contemporary fantasy or urban
okay.
fantasy. Those
Okay.
they're kind of interchangeable.
Yeah, every genre now has some demi genres that we're going
That's
down and down, right?
subgenres and with
Subgenres. So
yeah.
but this was not your first one. So tell us a little bit about how you got into writing.
Well, like a lot of us afflicted with the writing bug, I wanted to write from a really young age. I was, writing a little fantasy novel in my Dare folder in like, fourth
So you were
grade.
always a fantasy kid?
Yeah, I mean, really from reading The Hobbit back in like third grade or whatever. And
No way. You were in third grade.
yeah, so I was into it from when I was little. So I kind of
Wow.
wanted to do it. But then I got older. I went to college. I got into theater as well. So I went to
Hmm.
college for theater, went to Florida State University, moved out to LA. And like all reasonable people, my plan was like, well, I want to become an author, but I need to have some life experience under my belt first. So
Hmm.
I'm just going to go to LA. I'll get my own TV show, get a lot of money, be a big star in LA, write some screenplays,
As you do.
those produced as one does. And then having all that success and money, then I'll be able to just smoothly transition to a career as an author. So
It's a
um,
good plan.
it
I
makes
like it.
sense, right? It just makes sense. So I did move to LA. I lived out there for about 9 years. I did some acting. I acted in about a dozen national TV commercials, was in the union, all that stuff. I did have a couple screenplays that were optioned by Hollywood producers. There were a couple challenges during that time. A couple times I had things close to being produced, and then
Mm.
or signed or whatever, and then it was like the writer's strike came along. Like
Oh
various
my
things.
gosh. Yeah.
It was such a roller coaster where it's like, "Ooh, this might happen," and then it's like, "No, that's not going to happen." So
See, I don't think most young people, or maybe even older people, we don't understand that about Hollywood, right? Like how many things get almost optioned and like just
yeah, yeah. I mean, you definitely hear about the stories of like, "Oh yeah, it got shopped to 5 studios, and then finally this one got it or whatever." But like, I don't know. You don't necessarily hear about all the different sort of
Right.
trials and tribulations somebody goes
Yeah.
through as they are making their way through
Yeah.
that.
We
Or
only hear about the overnight successes, quote unquote, because something finally clicks in just the right moment, like, right? Like
yes.
we don't want to hear about all the other hard times.
Right. And it is definitely just the right moment, right? It's like, you know, the stars have to align, the executives and the marketing people have to be like, "Oh, we're looking for this kind of script." And then it happens to come
Right.
through and they're like, "Oh yeah, this is the script we're looking for." And or you
Right.
know, comes across some actor's agent's desk and they like it, or a manager, and
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, this is cool, a good vehicle for so and so, you know.
Right.
So there's so many variables.
Right.
It's it's a challenging industry, but fun. I mean,
Have
I
fun.
wouldn't avoid that experience, you know.
Okay. I mean, you got to write, like you got to work on things that you like. Did you work with other people or were you like a solo screenwriter?
I was a solo screenwriter. I was writing spec scripts that then I would, you know, would be shopped around or whatever. So,
Would you
uh,
ever go back to try to sell those?
not those particular ones. I mean, that was a time and place that those
Okay.
were written, you know. And I think at this time, and it's hard when you're not in LA. You
Mm,
know, at this point, I'm building up my kind of book empire at this
yeah.
point in time.
Yeah.
So you know, my pathway now would be to have my books get more successful and maybe catch the attention of somebody. I mean, I still have
Yeah.
some friends out there
Well,
and
then
think,
you'd have that experience, right? Like if they option your books, then you can say, "Hey, can I
right.
write this screenplay?"
Yeah, I mean, I certainly could write a screenplay. It's definitely
I mean, you can't
really,
necessarily, for anyone who doesn't know, you can't necessarily go from novel writing to screenplay writing without knowing. Like it gets a completely different art form, as far as
yeah.
I've been told.
Oh, it is. It totally is. The format's different and the method of storytelling is different because
Mm,
everything has to be visual, right? Everything has to be in action or something that is visually seen, or spoken, a voiceover. So it's like
okay.
so concrete, but it's really actually that experience is really good, um, as a writer because you really get used to writing in scene and thinking in scene, and the whole show don't tell aspect of
Right.
thing, it really gets ingrained in you because sometimes like that's always a problem. You're like, oh, I have to get this information across, but how can I do it in a scene where it's in
Yeah.
the moment and people are seeing it? You know, I can't
Yeah.
400 years ago in the kingdom of such and such, these seven things happened, right? It's like, nope, you can't do any of that. It's like, show me a scene right now and somehow
Yeah.
put that in. So it's really actually really good preparation for novel writing.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, and your scene has to like make sense, right? Otherwise it gets cut. It needs to be part of the story, which I think with some of my clients, I'm like, this scene is beautifully written and it doesn't move the story at all. Like you're gonna have to cut it and
Yeah.
cut your darlings, right? Like people don't want to cut those things. But I would
Yeah.
assume writing that screenplay, you're thinking, oh, what do I not want them to just cut because it means nothing um, to the
Right.
story.
It has to all be moving the story forward. And even, you know,
Right.
for readers, I would recommend like if there's some scenes that where nothing is happening or you're not, or it just somebody tells you like, oh, this all seems like backstory, or you're really showing and not telling, try writing it in as a screen, like a play,
Okay.
a screenplay. Like just do that as an exercise. And all of a sudden, like, okay, where specifically is this taking place? You know, what's the character doing at the beginning of the scene? What are they physically saying to the other person? Like it has to be, it all turns into action.
Right.
And as a being the you know being an actor was also really helpful in terms of writing and writing scenes because where you begin as an actor, looking at a scene is always about like what does my character want in this scene
Okay. Oh, okay.
versus what's in their way. Not like just the whole arc of the story, but
Right.
in this specific scene, like what does my character want? What are they trying to accomplish? And what is like in their way? And that's what creates the dramatic tension in every scene of a movie
Interesting.
or a
Okay.
play. But to when you imbue that in your work as a novelist, that also makes scenes come to life, you know?
Yeah.
So it's not just like it's a typical day, you know, the guy is, you know, hoeing the field or whatever. Like, what is it? What is it he's really trying to get done, or she is really trying to get done?
Right.
What is in their
Right.
way at that moment, you know? And it doesn't have to be a high stakes scene, you know, like
Yeah.
maybe they're a barista, they're trying to make the coffee and their cat keeps trying to trip them, you know, running around their feet.
Yeah.
to trip them, right? It's not necessarily high stakes, but there is some conflict. There's
Yeah.
something happening. And I think that's like again for beginning writers, that's something you see sometimes a scene where like
Yes.
there is no conflict, all right? And it's like there's got
I've
to be,
actually,
you
yes,
know.
I've had to argue with some new writers of whether or not there should be conflict at all in their book. And I'm like, yes, there is.
I think yeah, I think you're right.
Yes, there has to be. Like you said, it doesn't have to be high stakes conflict all the time, depending on the genre, but yeah, there should be conflict. Otherwise, I'm not sure what we're doing here.
Yeah. Otherwise, there's literally nothing. If someone can write a book without any conflict that's interesting, I'll give you $1. That'd be great. But
Well, okay, and then you want to finish it. There's a little bit more to you can write whatever you want, but if
well,
you
that's
only
true.
want to
But
read
like,
it and finish it
I mean, yeah, write it and make it interesting. Yeah.
and make it interesting that people you get at least one 5 star, then maybe we'll make this a contest.
Yeah.
So after 9 years of doing screenplays in LA, what did you do after that?
So then I moved back east here. I lived in Canada for about 8 months and then came back to Michigan, which is where I'm from originally, and kind of
You
bounced
went
around.
to the cold? Why would you
That it's a very long story why leaving LA and coming back, but ultimately I always wanted to come back to. I
Okay.
live in a small town in Michigan, and it's a beautiful place, wonderful small town, great place to raise kids and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, my vision was always to move back here, and
Okay.
I'm on the city council here, stuff like that. Like
Nice.
I love the town, so was very happy to move back, and it's a great place to live.
Yeah, I have to be careful because I am very biased. I'm from Wisconsin and
Okay,
I
yeah.
never had any plan to ever go back. That was never ever good. That was never on the table.
A
In
lot of
fact,
people.
my
Yeah.
fiance, my now husband, got a job offer in Wisconsin, and it like half the sentence was out of his mouth, and I was like, no, no.
I mean,
It's
it's
just personal bias.
cool. Yeah, yeah. Where do you live now?
DC, which I would not recommend to anybody,
Okay.
as I hit my listeners over the head with all the time. We're only here because of his job, but yeah, we did my dream. We lived in Europe for 10 years and then we
Oh,
had to
wow.
come home. Anyway, whatever. I would
Wow.
not recommend DC either. There's like a foot of snow out here. This is what I
Same, same. There's a lot of snow here. So,
yeah, we're in the same boat. So you're in Michigan. You're living a lovely small town life, which actually the older I get, the more I'm like that sounds fabulous.
mhm,
I really want to go to a small town.
mhm.
Why are you going to try to write books? Because I mean, we do know some people make money from the books, right? But it's not a given. So why did you get into to book writing?
Well, it's just like the thing that I'm best at in the world,
Mm,
I feel
okay.
like. Somebody might read my books and disagree, but it's
But
it's
it's a thing that won't let you go, right? Like we
yeah, it's just so it's a part of my identity. It's something I've done. I mean, like almost every day for the past what 15 years or something. That's what I've done. You know what I
you
mean?
can't do,
So
yeah.
actually more than that. I'm not gonna say how many years, but for a long time, every day, that's just part of my practice, part of my identity, um,
Hmm.
and so it's something I'll never.
But it felt natural to go from like screenplays to novels.
I always knew that I wanted to write novels, and
Okay.
it really was a thing of like life experience. I just really
Hmm.
knew I wanted to write books, but I just thought, there's so much that goes into a novel that at 20 years old, like I felt like I needed to just live a little bit before I
I mean,
said.
that's wise though. I think sometimes at 20 we think we can do anything.
True. Well, and I think and a lot of people go like the fan fiction route, if
Hmm.
they're maybe not feeling ready to create their own world, they start off in fan fiction, which is great. It's just not the way that I went about it, but
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
mm.
Yes, but I didn't actually know about fan fiction. But yeah, that apparently that was a big thing that I should have tried in college. Like
Yeah.
I might have gotten further in my or quicker, I guess, in my career. But so you're a fantasy and a horror writer, and like what came first as far as books went?
So the very first book I ever wrote was The Sleepwalkers, which is a horror book. And
Sounds like it.
For those of you who are visually able to see right now, I can hold that one up. Here's The Sleepwalkers. So that's the first book that I ever wrote. And it took a while before that one was published. Sort of a long story about how I first got published also, but I was first published with a kind of mid-sized press called HCI Books, and they put out my first, it was a young adult series that I co-authored. Um,
Okay.
and then when the first book of that was starting to get going, I pitched them The Sleepwalkers, and they said, "Oh, we love this. We'll publish that too." And then I pitched them another book called Blood Zero Sky, which is a dystopian science fiction book, adult dystopian science fiction. They also loved that. They also, published that. And then it was also that YA trilogy that was
Hmm.
it was like a urban fantasy trilogy.
Okay. How was your experience with a mid-size, like having the more traditional published?
Um, it was cool. I mean, it was a dream come true. Like I'll always remember the day that I got to go down to their like headquarters in Miami, and they were
Yeah.
all and I was like the hot shot young guy. Like they're like, "Oh, we love you." Like everybody had read the book because HCI Books had done the Chicken Soup for the Soul books. Like that was kind of
Hmm.
a big thing. They launched those, and they did mostly self-help books and things like that. But this was the time when Twilight was really big, so they were
Okay.
like it was like gold rush time. They're like, we got to get into YA books, you know? So,
Yeah.
um, and so there's this woman, Charlene Keel, who I had known from LA. Long story, she and I were going to pitch some TV shows together, but she moved away. She moved to Florida. She had met with HCI Books. She had done all kinds of stuff in her life. She had been a head writer for Days of Our Lives and all kinds of stuff.
Wow.
And so she met with them and they're like, we really want a YA book series. And she remembered a TV show idea that I had come up with that we had talked about pitching to TV shows. And she's like, I have an idea. And I have a co-author for this. And so she pitched it to, so she talked to me. I was like, do you mind if
Oh,
I,
I was like, without talking to you.
she talked to me. She's like, hey, do you mind if I pitch this
Yeah,
idea we
yeah.
have to this publishing company? I was like, sure, go for it. At that point I'd like,
Thinking nothing's gonna
yeah, I
happen.
figured nothing's gonna happen with it. So yeah, she pitched it to them. They're like, "Yeah, we want to do it. Let's go." So I was in the very odd position of having a book deal, my first book deal, without having
With
written
no books?
with no book, which is like pretty much unheard of for fiction, right? For a first non.
That's super unheard of, but like as well as I guess you had experience with deadlines and with writing, right? And it was your idea, right? So I'm sure you had some sort of, but how was that to be like between deadlines and writing a novel and like you, I don't know, that sounds like feels like a lot of pressure.
Well, so yes, first of all, it was a crazy time in my life. I just moved from LA. I was living in Canada as an illegal immigrant, so I was literally like working a construction job, like under the table to make a living. And I get this book deal, right? And I'm like, this is it, right? So I'm like every day grinding. And I said to the co-author, I was like, okay, I'll I'd never co-authored something, but I was like, I'll write this with
Okay.
you because it's my idea. I would like to write the first draft. And she's
Okay.
like, okay. So the way it worked was I would write a chapter, I would send it to her, she would make her tweaks, send it back to me, I would tweak those, and then we would proceed to the next chapter. Um, but yeah, it was just this crazy time in my life, right? Where I'm like, work a 9 hour construction day, like come home, work on the book. So it was a really a wild time.
That does sound wild. So how much of this story did you have? Like that sounds like a pantser's nightmare of
Yeah.
like it was are you a plotter? Like how does this relate to like screenwriting and how much you had in your head versus being able to write literally chapter by chapter?
Yeah. So we had Charlene, my co-author, and we wrote an outline for
Okay.
so especially with co-authoring to like totally pants it would have been tough. So we
Yeah.
definitely hammered out an outline ahead
Okay.
of time, and went from there. And
Okay.
my earlier books, I was more of a pantser. As time has gone on, I've become really more of a plotter that I just do that thinking ahead of time.
Hmm.
Because I've had too many experiences where I will, write 100 pages and then be like, oops, this is not going,
That's not where
not where I wanted it to go. And
I
then
mean,
it's
this is fun and all, but this
yeah,
is
but
not.
no, but I should have done it a totally different part or whatever. And I mean, that's brutal. I mean, talk about a momentum killer, right? You've been
Yes.
working on this book for 3 months and then you're like, oops, none of this is usable.
Yep. All of the things. I now know my character wants this.
Yeah,
Start,
yeah,
start again.
right. So yeah, no. So as time has gone on, more and more, and it's hard, like plotting it out ahead of time is hard, outlining
Hmm.
is hard. but to just do that mental work ahead of time. And really, actually, the way that I really settled on like, no, I'm just going to be a plotter was I was ghostwriting. I've also been a ghostwriter.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how many books I ghost wrote, um, but so for that process, the company required that you come up with a super detailed outline with your client. So I would be like working on my own books at the same time I'm working on my books with the client, and I'd be like, gosh, like when I sit down to work on my book, it's such a grind. It's so hard.
Oh,
And then when I'm working on the client's book, I just sit down and I'm like breezing through it, and I'm like,
and
huh,
you know where it's going. Were
I know
those fiction?
those were some were fiction and some were nonfiction. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you felt like you had more of a place to start from. You didn't have to like do the mental energy maybe to figure out what are you writing today, do you think? Or
Yeah, it's like writing with a prompt, right? Because if you're a pantser, you don't know
yeah,
where to go, you sit down, you look at what you wrote last, and you're like, what should happen next, right? And maybe
yeah,
okay, maybe you jump right into it, or maybe you're like gears are going, or maybe you've been, so busy with other stuff that you have to like get your head back into it, like, okay, what should happen next? And it takes some thought. But if you've done all that thinking ahead of time about the plot, I would just literally sit down, look at
right,
the sentence on the outline and be like, yep, that's what I'm writing today. Sit down and write it. And it was like
right,
easy
right.
and smooth compared to the mental grind of pantsing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm fully a plotter at this point. Yeah.
Oh, are you? Okay. I mean, and there is something about like mentally plotting, even though I have to write things down because I wouldn't remember otherwise. In fact, last night, right before fell asleep, I thought of something and then I thought, yeah, I don't know why I even bothered. I'm not going to remember tomorrow. And now, of course, I can't remember what it even
Right.
pertained to, whether it was my book or something else. Um, so you're a full plotter when you say that. Do you write it all down? How like is it 80 pages like Patterson or is it just like skeleton?
Yeah, no, it's not 80 pages. It's about, so my books end up being around 50 short chapters, 40 or 50 short chapters. And it's like maybe two sentences per chapter.
Just sort of knowing where you're going.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, that's interesting. So you have found a like a pattern to your writing. I'm gonna check if you have 50 chapters. Your chapters are short. I actually like that as a reader. I write long. Um, so you've sort of seen that as a pattern in your own writing, that it's about 50 chapters, and then you can figure that out from there.
Yeah, that tends to be what it is. And
Oh,
that translates usually to, again, like the screenwriter mind, those
right.
translate to scenes pretty
Okay.
much.
Yeah.
And also, but that length, it is also probably has to do with just my life and how my writing schedule works. Like I try to
Mm-hmm.
complete a scene, which is typically a chapter. I try to complete a scene during a writing session, and I
Right.
typically have about an hour to sit down and write it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that tends to be like the way that it chunks out. But I do think that for readers, my books tend to like flow and kind of cruise along pretty
Yeah.
well.
I was just gonna say, like, that there is a lot of action, that it's very tight, right? Like there is no fluff or whatever, but even still, like, it's not short, right?
No,
There's a lot of plot that goes into it. In fact, when you were talking about the demigods and the god, I was like, oh yeah, I actually forgot about that part, right? Like it's um there's a lot that goes into this, but I think also as readers we just love to be able to finish a chapter. Like there's,
right.
I'd like to finish this chapter before I fall asleep, and so there's something psychologically nice about short
It's
chapters.
true. And even when you look ahead of the next chapter, you're like, oh, maybe I can read one more chapter. Let me see how long it is, right? And if it's like 30 pages, you're like, no,
Yes.
I'm good. I'll read. I can't do
Exactly.
it.
Exactly. Or like honestly, if it's YA too, I know with my kids, one of them struggles with dyslexia and she'll be like, "Oh, that's one whole paragraph." Yeah, I'm not
Right.
doing that. Like,
Yeah. It gets daunting for people. So,
yeah, like it's the classics, where you're like, "Oh, Dickens, could you just
oh
put a
yeah. Yeah.
paragraph of this in there?" Oh my gosh. But you were saying that your writing schedule, and we're gonna get to, because you have new books coming out. So I will like come back. You said your writing schedule, like you have 1 hour. I think for some people, maybe if they're only focusing on writing, or I think maybe if you're starting out, you think most people are like full-time writers in which they sit down for 8 hours a day and they're only writing, right? So what is your writing life like? Are you doing a full-time job as well? Or like how do you organize your time here?
Yeah, I had a couple years when I was traditionally published that I was writing full time, but for a while I've had a day job. I am the
Hmm.
executive director of a arts organization, a
Oh,
theater.
that's fun.
It is actually really fun. I mean, it's like the coolest job. So I love it. I really enjoy it. It's it's a theater that's prominent in the community. We bring in super cool bands. We have a youth theater.
Yes.
It's great. It's a great job.
Yeah.
So I enjoy that. But yeah, so I'll drop my kids off in the morning. I'll sit down. I will knock out an hour of writing, make a TikTok or something real quick, and then I'm transitioning to my day job life, and then
Yeah.
maybe in the evening, if I have some time, I'll be able to do some admin, work on ads or something like that. Um, but that's sort of the rhythm of it. And I guess I don't, the bad thing is I don't have a lot of time. And sometimes you are like, gosh, I could do more. If I had time,
Yeah.
I could be one of those people who's making 10 TikToks a day. Who knows?
Yes.
Like the sky's the limit if you can make 10 TikToks a day.
Oh, it's yeah, it's like, oh my gosh. Everyone always thinks that that's a magic bullet, right?
Yeah.
Um, so you, I mean, you are just like in it in your day job. That it's not like because I think people also make stories. It's not like you're sitting at a reception desk and you're like secretly writing while
No,
you
yeah, no.
press
When I
hold.
work,
Really, you're like in it. So you have this whole, but there's also something to say for when you are that busy, sometimes your brain works in a different way and like it'll think of something for your book, and and whereas if you have and you've had, so let me know if this wasn't for you, like when you have those 8 hours, sometimes it's just like, I don't know. Like it's not like you are always writing 8 hours a day. Maybe some people are. I don't
yeah.
know.
Well, it's definitely when you have limited time, you can't afford to be self-indulgent. So when I
That's
when
a good way to put it.
when I
Yes.
get my cup of coffee and I sit myself in this chair, that is writing time, right? And
Yeah.
I do a couple things to like let the caffeine start to kick in, or I might scroll Facebook for a second or something. But pretty quick, I'm into the writing, and it's like
Yeah.
I know I've got that, 1 hour or whatever, and so I'm
Yeah.
focused on that. And you flip the switch, and you have to focus. I
Yes.
still find myself looking at my phone. Sometimes I throw it on the couch. I'm like,
Yes. No, I know
uh,
that thing. But yeah, you're right. You understand the limitations more, I feel like. And it's almost like when you retire, when you're in between jobs and you feel like I have all this time and COVID was a great example. I'm going to do all these things. And day
yes,
by day goes by and you're like, nothing has changed because I don't know, there's just this idea of all this time, I'll get to it later. And then when you're confined to it, you're like, oh, I'm excited almost to get this done, right? And to be in
yes,
my
yeah,
world.
yeah. You realize that that time is a luxury, and you enjoy it. You're like, yes, I'm going to take this time.
Right, right. And so you have written also so much that you're able to know like within an hour I can get a scene, which is a chapter for you, done. And like that's kind of like, that feels good, right? To be like, this is what I can do, this is what I can get done.
Yeah, and it's not hard and fast. Often I'll be able to get the scene done or get to a stopping point. Sometimes I won't. Sometimes I'm just like, I gotta go. I didn't get
Right.
done. And I don't beat myself up about it. And I don't
None
I
of it
don't
will.
also keep word count. Some people are like, I must write 5,000 words today.
Oh, okay.
I don't do that. I'm not able to do that. It's like I apply myself the best I can to that scene that day.
Okay.
When I'm out of time, I'm out of time. I have to walk away and I'll just pick it back up the next day.
Okay.
Um,
So you don't give yourself like a deadline?
No, I don't because I just can't. I
Mm-hmm.
have three kids that I have two 10-year-olds and a 6-year-old. Like they demand my time. I have my day job that demands my time, and so I do my very best. I do write 7 days a week. That's one thing I do
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
every day. And every weekend, same thing. Wake up every weekend day. I'm writing. So I think
Okay.
that's kind of the way I'm able to keep the productivity up. And I think it's really beneficial too, because then my mind is never completely out of the story, even though I don't have time to think about the story during the day because I have so much else going on. At least it's like, you know what, yesterday I was thinking about the story. Today I'm thinking about the story. Tomorrow I'm thinking about the story. Even
Right.
just for 1 hour, like those threads don't slip away as much if you're in it every day.
Yeah, yeah, that I mean that's true. Yeah. So I mean this goes into like even a little bit every day will move your book forward, right? Like it's, I tell people if you're waiting for that one 8 hour window, I don't know about you, but it's almost never come to me. I have three kids as well. Thankfully, they're a little older now. But yeah, I mean, it just never seems to appear, you know?
Right. Yeah. And I know some people are like, they need kind of the stars to have a line, their special slippers on and this and that. But you know what? I have worked. I used to work like as a leasing agent at an apartment complex. I used to write for 30 minutes on my lunch break in a vacant apartment. I used to write. I
Yeah.
mean, I can't tell you all the places that I've like sat down and got a little bit of writing in.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. This is a job for perseverance and persistence and, you know, um, uh, all of that. It will move it forward for sure. I'm trying to find your new Kickstarter. What is the name of your new Kickstarter? Because I found you through Kickstarter. I
yep.
would I was just I mean, there are some beautiful things happening on Kickstarter, honestly.
Yes.
Um, so let's see, you did the YA series and then a horror and a sci-fi dystopian
Mhm.
traditionally published. And then is that after that you became indie more? Or are
So
you
yeah, so the next thing, so after that, that traditional publisher, I realized that they gave fiction a great shot, but like they didn't necessarily know how to sell fiction. It just was not in
oh,
the wheelhouse yet. So it was,
okay.
I need to transition away. So
Okay.
I did the getting an agent thing. I got an agent at a big agency, which was fantastic. At the time, I had a YA horror book that was shopped around. She shopped it all around. There's a lot of groupthink in traditional publishing. So the groupthink at that time, though, was like, like YA horror is a tough one. Like some YA horror book had just come out that they paid a big advance for. They thought it was going to go gangbusters. It was
And they
disappointing.
didn't.
Um, so the idea was like, YA horror doesn't sell, which is absurd if you think about, oh, teenagers don't like
Like
horror. Like, of course they do. Come on.
I'm
But
thinking of like my entire teenage
yeah, exactly.
years.
Like, they love horror movies, but they don't. But anyways, but the groupthink is like insidious in traditional publishing. So the groupthink was like already like it's an uphill slog to get this thing sold.
Yeah.
But so the agent like shopped it around. She was a new agent at a very big agency. She shopped it around. It didn't sell. It went to committee at a couple of publishers. One of them was like, "Oh man, we already signed a book for this period that's too similar or whatever." So it got close. It did not sell.
That
That
is one problem with traditional of like, oh, we already have one like it. Where you're
yeah,
like, if you look at TikTok, people are insatiable. Like they just
yeah, oh, I
want,
know.
you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
Like
can
a
feel your
reader will read a
frustration.
book. I know a reader will read a book in three
They
days, right?
want the same thing
They want
again.
something
Like,
like it. Yeah. And that's part of the problem. Traditional publishing has that's just one of the frustrations. But exactly, I mean, that just like showcases the absurdity of it. Like, oh no,
yes,
we can't have two books that are somewhat similar.
can't have two horror books. What?
Yeah, two horror books. Who's gonna read that? Yeah. Yeah, we have to wait till next year to put out another horror book.
Yeah. Meanwhile, people are buying entire series at the same time. It's like,
Yeah,
okay,
I
whatever.
know. It's so
Yeah.
silly. But
Wait,
so anyway,
what year was this? 2015,
uh,
2014?
um
Or was it later? That
yeah, 2014-ish. Yeah.
wow,
About that.
wow. Okay. I was
So
thinking like, wow.
yeah, it was a while ago. So it didn't sell in the end. That
Oh,
agent ended up leaving that agency.
right.
I
You
didn't
have
go.
that problem too in the traditional, like,
Yeah, you're so dependent on other people
mm-hmm,
for a long time. So she and I parted ways, and I realized that book wasn't going to work out. So I wrote a couple other things in the meantime. I like was in the querying trenches for a while.
mm-hmm,
Um, corresponded with a lot of different agents, never quite settled on the
mm-hmm,
agent match. And finally, like some years passed, and I was honestly quite depressed and frustrated. And I'd always like looked down, honestly, on indie publishing, um, especially from the vantage point of having been traditionally published. I'm like, I'm not going to
mm-hmm.
just self-publish. I'm not going to vanity publish my own book. Like that's,
Well,
I
when we were younger, that's what it was called. It was
it
called
really
vanity.
was. It was like that pejorative term. Oh, that's vanity publishing if you publish it yourself. And my other, thinking was like, okay, it was so hard to sell books with a publishing company behind you. When they're talking
Mm-hmm.
Barnes and Noble reps, they're doing all this stuff, they're getting
Yeah,
you views and all this stuff. If it's so hard to sell books in that context, like how
right.
could I do it myself, you know, like, you know
With
what?
kids working. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like in all these like things that I didn't know how to do and didn't want to learn, marketing or
Hmm.
graphic design or any of that kind of stuff. So, or in the money, you know, it's like I don't have thousands of dollars to pour into a book that might sell three.
Oh my. Yeah,
You know? Yeah.
exactly.
So for years, I just like was like, well, I'm stuck, you know, and I just
Yeah.
kept kind of banging my head against the wall of like, well, I got to get a good agent. I got to go that route.
Yeah.
For years, I did that. And finally, I was just really depressed about it and frustrated. And I had written Girl of Hearts, and I was like, I know this book is great. I know people would love to read it. I know it's as good as other books out there. Um, and finally, I don't know what it was, but I just finally hit a point where I was like, you know what? I'm just going to start a publishing company. I'm just going to do it myself.
Hmm.
And I'm so happy that I did. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
That
amazing.
just
Yeah.
takes a click, I think. I mean, honestly, I think that you hit it at the right time. Like romance was kind of what made Kindle, you
Mm.
know, but fantasy has become bigger and big. Like it's always been big under the surface, and now like the fantasy people get to be like find each other, right? And they're no longer like the theater kids or like kind of the subcategory kids. They're like, no, we're all fantasy people. We get to be part of this. And it just probably hit at the right time too. Like maybe it wouldn't have hit in 2015. You just never know.
You never know. No, it's totally true. I mean, definitely fantasy is having a moment, and certainly TikTok was huge for me as well.
Yeah.
So, I was seeing a lot of authors saying, "Oh yeah, you know, people are having great success on TikTok." I
Yeah.
wasn't on there. I didn't know anything about TikTok, but what I saw authors saying, and it's like some author groups and stuff, was like, "Gosh, it would be great to be on TikTok, but I'm nervous about being on camera." As for me,
Yeah.
well, I'm a former
Yeah, you can do
professional
that.
actor, right? Like I am not shy. I don't mind being on camera. So I thought, huh, maybe. And I did have a friend who was in the middle of I did get an MFA in writing from Spalding University
Hmm.
and taught writing at college for a little while too. So I had a friend that was doing it, and I kept seeing her TikTok videos like come up on my Instagram feed, and I was like, you know, maybe I could do that. So as I was getting ready to launch Girl of Hearts, I got on TikTok and was fortunate to just like have some videos that did pretty well and
Yeah.
started connecting with people and, um, built up people on there. And really, especially from being a writer from the old school a little bit and having had the experience of like going to Barnes and Noble for signings for my traditional book, and you show up there and maybe a couple of people have heard of you and come and get the book signed. And then for 4 hours, you're sitting there watching people trickle through and just like,
That's such a weird thing that they do still.
yeah, right. And like, so to compare that though, sitting
Yeah.
there for 4 hours and maybe you sell 25 books, which is fantastic or whatever.
Hmm.
You get 18 cents a piece for it because you're traditionally published. Literally like, um, but like, so compare that to I can sit in my own house. I can make a really
Yeah.
fun, silly video that tells a story that like shows my personality, and maybe it'll go to 1,000 people that are like book lovers, right?
Hmm.
And I like made sure I super optimized my TikTok that it was like only book people I was interacting with.
Right.
And to fast forward to now, I've got 20,000 followers, which I mean, a lot of people have more than that, but like but it's like 20,000 like book love,
Book people. Yeah.
you know.
And if they're fantasy lovers and just doing social media correctly can get you so much further than a PR agent, like
Yeah.
it's what are we going to do now without TikTok?
Oh, God.
That's a whole other whole we're all just crossing our fingers that, it
For
doesn't
me,
go.
it would be terrible because that's like it's also the only social media that does well for me. Like everything else is
Well,
like,
because their algorithm's so
there.
much better. Their algorithm, you can curate it much better. And I'm sorry, Zuckerberg, but I keep getting so many ads on everything else. Anyway, that's a whole different
Yeah. Yeah.
thing.
Facebook is like, if you pay me $20, I'll let your own followers see this post you made.
I
That's
know, but only for an hour, and
yeah,
then
yeah.
it'll go,
That it will be
anyway.
never seen again. TikTok is like, oh, you made this stupid video in 20 seconds. We're gonna show it
We're gonna
to
show it to everyone.
4,000 people, whatever.
It's
Okay.
so funny.
Yeah.
And it's the 27th when this goes out, so maybe there will be a like a change on that. I think we're all
That's,
pretending that there's going to be a change. I am, at least. I still post over there. I'm like,
I hope we will have been rescued by then. Yes.
yes, please rescue us. We just want to make our silly videos.
Yeah.
Uh, but it's a great way to connect with people, right? And your acting and your screenwriting and stuff probably helped you as well with Kickstarter, because Kickstarter is a very visual, like, I mean, it wasn't created for books, right? It was created for the arts. And so, but book people found it because that's what we do. But you're supposed to make like a video, and you're supposed to, make these visuals and things. And clearly you know how to do visuals. Like, I think this is beautiful. Your visuals on the other on the, what is the series called? The
That was the Luck
the
Gods.
Luck Gods. Yeah, it's right there. But now you have this other one, and it's also eye catching. So how did you find Kickstarter, and why did you use it? Because this is what people ask me, like, why would I do this?
Right. Well, I think for like for a lot of people, it caught my attention when Brandon Sanderson made $40 million off of Kickstarter. I think a lot of book people are like kind of perked up, like, wait, what? Um, Not that I thought I was going to have Brandon Sanderson style success, but like, you saw and a lot of other, and then you look at it and you go, oh, a lot of other authors you
Mhm.
were having success on there. And so I thought I was like, okay, I'm going to try it out because I had a book, The Lamplighters, which was a middle grade book, and
Mhm.
I was like gonna launch it, but I kind of wanted to, I'd spent some money on ads for the Luck God series. My business was
Okay.
kind of like low on funds.
Mhm.
I want to launch this book, but like I want to get some funds at the time that I launched it. So I was like, why not try launching it on Kickstarter? You literally have nothing to lose, right? I was like, if it doesn't,
Really, you just decided, like, why not?
yeah, why not do
Okay.
it? So I tried it and it raised just over $2,000, which is low for Kickstarter,
No,
but
but it's a great infusion of cash into your book launch.
right.
I'm
And you can,
looking at it now. It's a beautiful cover as well.
oh, thank you. Yeah. So, but you compare that to even like Amazon royalties, like, okay, how many ebooks do you have to sell on Amazon to get $2,000? Like quite a lot.
Don't make me depressed. We're having a lovely conversation.
Well, but no, but we're getting excited about Kickstarter.
Yes,
So then,
yes.
so then the next one. So then I was like, okay, well
Okay.
that did pretty well. And then so I was like, okay, well let me do one for the Luck God series because I was
Yeah.
coming toward getting that series completed. So I was like, let me do some
Okay.
limited edition because that's what really like kills it on Kickstarter, like limited edition, super fancy books.
Yes.
And so I had an idea to create some fantasy books for that and or some limited edition books and I can show for people who are
Yeah.
visually to see it. This is like one of them. And I really played with the format of it being on Kickstarter. So those of you can
Yeah.
you see it looks like a playing card. It has the character image on there, but it has no title. It doesn't have my name or anything like
Oh,
that.
that's curious.
Very unique, but it's designed to never be in a bookstore. And that
Right.
Kickstarter, it never has to be in a bookstore, but it can sit on your shelf and someone's gonna be like, what the heck is that book? Like, whoa, it's got no title, no nothing. And even you open it up and on the case laminate cover inside, it also is just like this beautiful like texture and like golden.
Who did that for you?
I did it. I did it all.
But
Um,
who printed it?
this is Ingram Spark.
And they did texture hardbook.
It's not texture. It looks
Oh,
like
it looks texture.
it looks very textured, but it's not.
You did that graphic?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, so I
That's
made all of those and yeah, and they're print on demand. So I didn't do a big print run or anything like that for
I
people.
was just gonna say, did you print like a sample?
I did, yeah. So I
Okay.
first I had a physical copy of book one that I printed. So I kind of like knew it would work, and I had it to show off importantly in the videos. But I think
Oh,
like you
okay.
say, it was eye catching. People would see it and be
Yeah.
like, "Oh, that looks different."
Yeah.
And so yeah, that one did quite well on Kickstarter.
So
And so
that was really, though, for like your first marketing wave was to people who had read the first couple books,
yeah,
maybe.
it was to my email list. It was to everybody on TikTok. Like a lot of people on TikTok went in and bought it. And then the cool thing about Kickstarter is it really is its own ecosystem. There's a lot
Yeah.
of people that just hang out on Kickstarter and have like a collection of like
Hmm.
high-end deluxe hardcover books on their fancy bookshelf. and they will go through and they will buy, if they think that a hardcover is beautiful and cool, they will buy
They'll
it.
buy it.
And the price point there is higher. I mean, it's just very different than like selling
Yeah, that's true.
a book on Amazon for, maybe an ebook for 3.99 or something. Um,
But
and
you
when
could sell it for $30, it says.
Yeah, those were 30 a piece. So I sold, it was a set of
That's
four.
not bad.
It really wasn't, because I did the way I did it, print on demand, it was not. So it was
Okay.
120 for all four hardcover set.
Yeah, that's not bad.
And then there's some other swag and stuff that was in there. So
Okay. Yeah, you had a really good collection that like the so what are the interesting things to remember with Kickstarter? Because I know lots of people like to get on bandwagons, and I've seen some epic, I'm going to use the word epic fails,
yeah.
because they just thought that they were going to ride the coattails of people
Mhm.
who had done it correctly. So what are
Yeah.
the things that you really saw that, and how did you figure out that you need to pay attention to in order for this? Because if it doesn't fund, you get no money. In case nobody knows this, if you don't fund your goal, Kickstarter gives nothing and just pretty much like cancels it, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, the step one is set your funding goal correctly. So don't set your first one for $20,000 if you don't actually need $20,000 to produce
Mm,
what it is you're producing.
hmm
Set it at $250, set it at $500, set it at $1,000. And a lot of it depends on your audience. Like, how many people do you have on your email list? How many people,
mm,
social media followers do you have? And look at other comparable campaigns. Like, where are they funding at? If it's a similar
okay.
product, similar book.
Looking at the genres, maybe like,
Yeah, looking at
or,
the genre, like, yeah, where are some books that have similar covers, similar tropes? How
okay.
are they doing? And then it is a very visual medium, like you say. So if you scroll through so Dragons and Aces is the one that's
Hmm.
up right now. It's an enemies to lovers romantasy, with a bit of spice in there. Sort of like Fourth Wing, but the Morley Gray male love interest is a biplane pilot, and the female is a dragon rider from
Oh,
Enemy Nation,
nice.
right?
Nice.
So, but
Again, the graphics are like they're eye catching. That's the thing. Like it really draws you in.
And I think that's what it has to be, right? It has
Okay.
to be, because also when people are just going through the Kickstarter platform, they see
Mm,
thumbnails of the different campaigns. So yeah, you really want it to be like visually beautiful. And again, I do
hmm
all my own, but there are people, graphic designers who do it and are experts in it. But I think that's what's really important. And the people
Okay.
who are on there, they want a really beautiful book. And a lot of the
Yeah.
hardcovers on there are not cheap, but they're gorgeous.
Yes.
So this one I'm
Yes.
doing has the foiling, has sprayed edges. It's going to have a color map. It's going to have a color character illustration. So they're fancy, beautiful collector's edition books.
Okay. Yeah. And so this is, of course, it's going to be a little pricier. Like putting your price points, does that take a lot of like investigation on? Because I've heard of people like literally losing money
Yeah.
because they just, I don't know, I guess they didn't get their price point correct.
Well, you have to be careful because yeah, I mean you could totally raise $30,000 on Kickstarter and make zero, right? Because like,
That's
oops,
rough.
that's how much it cost me. So you need to crunch the numbers.
Okay.
Like the simple rule of thumb is whatever it's going to cost you to produce like the book, just double it, right? Um,
Okay.
is the simple rule of thumb. But there's a lot of like little expenses in there that you need to bear in mind, like
Mm,
shipping. And you charge people for shipping, but if you get it wrong, then you're going to eat the difference, right? So shipping, all
yeah.
all the swag items, all the materials like packing materials and stuff like that. Um,
Yeah. That's all stuff that you don't think of at the beginning.
yeah, and it's not cheap. Like even like the crinkle paper, it's like
Yeah.
it's not super cheap to get a thing of crinkle paper for packing. It's
It's really that. And then people were talking about like beautiful packaging, and that just adds more, right? Some people were buying like custom boxes
yeah.
in one Facebook group, and I was like, you guys are insane.
Yeah,
like,
right. And people
like,
love that. I mean, this is
of
definitely a
course they do, but oh my gosh, factor it into the price, right? Like that
that's
is,
factored into the price, and you have to weigh it too. Like okay, I have a beautiful box. It's gonna wow somebody. Somebody's gonna feel special when they open it. But like, you have to weigh it. Like, is that worth the extra expense? Like, you have to just balance that
yeah.
for everything. Or if it's going to tack another $5 onto what I'm charging, like would people really rather pay $5 more and have a super beautiful box, or would they rather just I put it
True.
in a white box that looks nice and
So
can.
how do you figure that out with your audience? Did you do any audience, or are you just sort of going by your gut on I mean, because you have been interacting with them for 2+ years. So
Yeah, a lot of it I go on my gut, and some of it has to do just with like your own brand, like and the decisions you
mhm,
make. Like I made the decision, um, as you said, and the price point for the last ones, it ended up being $30 a book for the hardcovers, which is
mhm,
pretty low for a limited edition exclusive hardcover. So that's kind of for my brand. I've tried to do that. I haven't like
mm,
been shooting the moon on like making it super expensive with like a billion bells and whistles. I kind of try and balance it to like, the star of the show is the book. So the book is going to
yeah,
be beautiful. It's going to be great. The packaging is going to look great. And the swag items, you're going to get a couple of like useful, cool items. You're going to get a on one of the levels an enamel pin. You get some bookmarks,
cool.
show off the little bookmarks and stickers and stuff like this. You're going to get
Yeah,
um,
I mean, those are always fun and
yeah.
useful, like you said, right?
Right, right. So, but it's not like stuffed with a million things. And some
Mhm.
of the items are digital, so you could, if you want to print it, you can print it. If you want to just have it to look at, you can have it to look at. So, I don't know.
And I guess this also has to do with the audience. Like fantasy does tend to be people who understand digital swag, whereas like if your audience is like literary women's fiction where they're mostly 55-year-old women, they might not understand the value of digital swag. So you definitely need to know your audience, right?
Yeah, that's
And
true.
who's buying it. But this is, I mean, this is a great example. Dragons and Aces will have the link to the Kickstarter in the show notes. But it's one book. Like it's not, but I also have to say, like, you have so much experience writing that I'm sure that there's a story as well to it, because I have seen this too where people have gone through the entire Kickstarter, and as reviews came in, like they hadn't gotten the story edited,
Hmm.
there were mistakes there, and it's like they put it all into the package and forgetting that the star of the show is the story.
Yeah. I would say definitely a backbone of my like publishing company and publishing brand is that the goal is always that my books would be indistinguishable from a traditionally published book, right?
Okay, yeah,
So for anybody, I mean, traditionally published books as well, occasionally a typo does
sure.
sneak in and you fix it as soon as you find it. But the goal is, I mean, my books are definitely edited. They are, some people crank out a book a month as indie published authors, which is great for them. Mine are more along the lines of 6 months, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
take it very seriously and I develop the story as much as I can. And they're not, where did I put the book? It's not like a little bitty book, right? It's a pretty substantial book.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
It's not like a 40,000 word book. You have a substantial story. It's actually 400. How many pages is it? 400. It's like almost 500 pages actually, this version of it. So
Yeah.
you're getting a substantial story for sure.
Yeah, and having read your books, I know that there's the story's tight and there's a lot going into it already. But just to make sure people know, I think sometimes we can get carried away with that Brandon Sanderson of like maybe I'll actually make some money back. Like, but what's great is Kickstarter is also you can set the time limit, right? So do you have like a strategy on time, or are you still playing around with each Kickstarter?
The best practice is to do it for about 3 weeks.
Mm.
So that's how long mine is.
How
Three.
long yours goes, yeah, to not get like, but you've done great. I mean, if people want to see it again, we'll have the link in the show notes. I think it's, even if you are even slightly thinking about doing a Kickstarter, I think the best thing you can do is study people who do it well. Like you need to go and see what it looks like and understand this, because this is different, right, than like running an ad on Facebook. It's just we different.
Yeah. Yep. And like anything, I mean, there's authors who do it orders of magnitude at a higher level than I am, and there's authors that are just really starting out and trying to find their legs on the platform
Mm-hmm.
out.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there's a variety of, I mean, there's definitely authors that I look at that are doing amazing things, and sure, I'm gonna definitely learn from them and try to
Yeah.
grow.
And whatever works. Honestly, I think the biggest thing is if you can not lose money, you're doing really well.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, that comes to structuring it, right? Like,
yeah,
is it going to be print on demand, or is it going to be, are you going to try and do a big print run where, like, if you don't make $20,000, you're losing your shirt,
yeah,
like, structure though. Mine are all print on demand. They're going to
yeah.
look gorgeous and amazing, but like, I structure it so I cannot lose money, basically.
Yes, please take that. Or do not lose money on these things. I mean, there are so many more things that we could talk about. I think we might have to have you back on, but it was great to hear about your writing journey and to hear about your books. Jacob, it was great talking to you.
Yeah, it was really a pleasure talking to you too. I hope we will do it again. Have me back. I'd be love to
Yes,
do.
absolutely. Yes. Thank you.